Hey, how you doing? Rich Belgi here, and I just wanted to show a cool little thing that I figured out uh, while playing with this Call of Duty Ghosts off-duty video. So there's this ridiculous gun scene where we needed a ton of flares, and I stab him in the head, and it's this section right here. There's lots of brass flying, and to animate all those, I came up with a little rig. So I made this example file to show what I did and what I wanted. Let me go fast forward here. I wanted to be able to automate the process of emitting the brass from the gun and having it interact with at least some kind of plane, because there's one shot where the brass just go out of frame and it doesn't matter, but then the shot where the two of us face each other, there's a wall, there's the ground, there's a lot of things. And as I started manually dropping in my brass things, I realized, man, this long scene is a lot of things to animate. It's not looking right. It's looking like crap. And it was really time consuming. So I wanted to change how I did that. So I thought, well, what if I used the brass, which is just from Action Essentials, from Video Copilot? What if I could use Particular? Because Particular lets you use sprites and all that kind of stuff. So I started playing around with that. So what you're seeing here, if I just let it play, is a null that is acting as my point source. And actually, if I select the null, I set it up to where this blue arrow is where the brass is facing. So as you can see, we're emitting, they're not like 3D or anything, but we're emitting that Action Essentials asset, the brass shell, and it's hitting this floor plane, bouncing off the wall, and then ultimately settling on the floor. And it's pretty cool considering it's in 3D space, but it's all 2D stuff, all inside After Effects. We're using Particular's physics engine. You see here I've made it so there's some randomness in the shot, in the ejection. And actually, if you play back real time, that's close to real time anyway with the screen capture. But as you can see, we have some randomness, way more random than you would ever want to animate. And we can use all of Particular's stuff for it. So we can make this random spread off, and now they all travel in a perfectly straight line, which obviously then you get this, and you don't really want that. And you can make it real wild, say 50. And now they're kind of coming out everywhere. See, sometimes towards the camera, some are going out. That's not really realistic either. I think I found 15 was pretty realistic. So now that you get some spread, some come out higher, some come out lower, some are coming out left or right. And it was really cool. And now all you have to do is animate the null. And once you get it behaving the way you want, just animate the particles per second. I'm doing three rounds per second because in the shot they were semi-automatic rifles, not full auto. So I figured, 3 is pretty realistic. 3 trigger pulls a second. You can go crazy. I think at one point I figured out what a Dillon minigun was. Shots per second wise. I don't think it's that high, but I mean, you can get pretty hilarious with it there. I mean, obviously that doesn't look right, but let's try. Okay, now there's some space between them. So that's 30 particles per second, which in our case is shots per second, which is pretty funny. If I go to the end here. Oh yeah. What I did notice with Particular is sooner or later you get this kind of a box. So the random directional spread, you'll still end up with a discernible pattern at some point, but you're not going to have a 2,000 frame shot doing one thing. But if you go back down, even to 5 or something, that's a pretty high rate of fire. And it'll be a while before stuff starts to pile up to where you see a pattern like that. So I linked it to this emitter, which is just a null. And what that lets us do is animate it. And see, especially as you go here, if I go up, it's as if particular assumes this plane extends forever along with this one. So as I rotate this, you could see it going way off in the distance. As I go this way, it hits and interacts with the wall and the floor. And then as I come this way, it even comes towards the camera, and yeah, there you go. That one just happened to randomly bounce off the floor and come up towards the camera. And that's the great thing about this rig, is you can put in a couple of planes that line up with your shot. Same way you would as if it was if you were going to go into a 3D program and do this. But you can do it all in After Effects in 2D and with particulars physics. I mean, it's pretty good. So stuff's coming towards the camera. Every once in a while, something bounces off the floor towards the camera. And then you can just animate, Shift P. Now you can animate this to match your firearm. So and when I did that shot, I just did a lot of motion tracking to the ejection port on the AR. Alright, so let's do this. Shooting, so this is the blue arrows pointing towards the camera. Let's shoot for that for a little bit, turn, and then shoot that way for a little bit. So let's pre-render that. Alright, here we go. So we got some shots coming towards the camera, and then it starts to move, and now they're getting spread out all over the room. Eventually you'll see them hit the floor and the wall, bounce around, start to accumulate. So it's pretty cool because to animate, that randomness, the gravity rotating through, to do that with manual keyframes, that would be a nightmare. So that's what's really cool about this and what I wanted to share. I think it works really well. Some of the expression linking was a little weird. You have to figure out what works and doesn't work. Right now I only have, as far as linking it to this null, I don't know a lot about expressions, but I couldn't really make it change the angle. I could just make it go straight out, but for what I wanted to do, that worked fine. So that's the effect. Let me show you a little how I set it up. As you see here, actually let me delete these keyframes. You see here, the bullets hit the ground, and this is kind of faux physics. This isn't a physics engine in like Cinema 4D or 3ds Max or something. So you see the bullets are moving, they hit, settle, and then slow down to a stop. So what I had to do was create this other comp, and it's basically spinning, 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 and then I believe this track they gradually come to a stop. And I just made it way longer than what the scene was going to be. So it's like a minute or something. So basically this is it getting ejected. It's full speed. And about the time it hit the ground and settled, or what I wanted to settle, I think I did a time remapping and made that decelerate. So you can see the whole animation ends around 6-7 seconds. So particular is looking at that, and that's the for under particle, you do a sprite. Once you pick sprite, texture will ungray out. I pick brass, start at birth, play once. So it'll start the animation at the birth of the particle, play it straight through as it is in that pre-comp, and then it'll just play it once, which is why I made it way longer than I wanted to, because I wanted it to hold on that last frame and not disappear. If you make it too short, you'll see the bullets start to disappear, so I just made it way too long. You're not really going to notice that it's not 3D and it's not real physics. These won't pile up and start to interact with each other. One's behind another, and they're not sitting on top of each other like in 3D. But for something quick, easy, you can change on the fly. You're not trying to sync up a 3D thing with the 2D thing and go back and forth between a 3D program and After Effects. It's all in After Effects, which keeps it nice and fast. Let's see here. What else is in here? So that's a particle. And you got size to play with. I didn't want any size random because all the bullets are going to be exactly the same. I didn't have to worry about opacity or transfer modes because this is all pre-keyed stuff. Again, from Video Copilot. Here, there's directional spread, there's velocity. I had to play around with that to, I think this is like pixels per second or something. So, a lot of the stuff in particular, what resolution you're running kind of will affect the velocity. So if it is pixels per second, which I think it is, if you're running 720p, that bullet will effectively be moving faster in the frame because you have less resolution. Did a little velocity random. You have to be a little careful because if you do too much, this bullet might catch up and pass this bullet. So I had to be a little careful to figure that out. Directional spread, I already mentioned, give it some to spread it out, but you can't go too crazy or it doesn't look realistic. Velocity for motion is cool, so if you animate the null, it'll carry that momentum with it. Again, you have to kind of play with it in your shot, see what makes sense. This essentially is your rate of fire. So right now it's 5 particles per second, but it could be 1 if it's a pistol and shooting slow. So 1. It all depends what your shot is. Particular has a million options, so your best bet is to start at the top. Play with the emitter, get it emitting from the right place. Okay, go to particle, get your particle looking right. I don't think there's anything else in particle. Shading, not doing any shading in this. Physics is important. So default I think is air. Had to switch to bounce gravity mode. Had to play around with gravity to get to look right. Again, maybe it's based on pixels. 1 gravity isn't like Earth gravity. It's not a 3D program that way. Then under the bounce, there's several options. There's a floor layer, which is the darker gray. And it's set to infinite plane, but you could do it layer size, and that's kind of cool because say this ledge right here where the plane stops, you could have it bounce, and then actually fall off that edge rather than be an infinite plane like I have it set. So it depends what you need. Wall, that's the lighter gray wall, and I have that set to infinite plane as well. And on collision event, which applies to all these, you have bounce, slide, which would kind of hit and stick to it, but keep moving whatever direction it's going. Stick would stop altogether. Kill would make the particle go away. When you hear wall and floor, you assume, okay, floor is the floor. It has to be, right here, like that. And wall, well, a wall is vertical, has to be here. Really just think of it as plane 1 and plane 2. There was another shot where I had to have a shelf. I had to simulate a wall and a shelf. And I wanted to hit the wall, bounce off the wall, kind of like what's happening here. But I wanted the shelf to only be so big. So it hit the wall, somewhat hit the shelf, and then go down, which in that case was out of the shot. So think of these as planes more than, having to be a floor or having to be a wall. You can make these any orientation and they'll still work. So you have 2 planes that you can line up any way to fit your shot. And then bounce random, slide. Bounce is how bouncy something is. And then bounce random will give you, if you zero out all these random things, including the spread and everything, you'll end up with everything following the same exact path and then piling up in the same exact spot. You don't want that. So play around with these values. Slide is how much it'll roll across the ground or move across the ground. If you have no slide, it'll hit. Bounce, still bounce, but when it comes back here, it won't go anywhere. So again, just play with those and see what makes the most sense. I don't think I did anything with AUG system, no, because that's secondary particles. I mean, if you really knew what you're doing with particular, the only thing I could think of is if you wanted a little smoke to follow the brass, which could happen in real life for the first few inches, because smoke is still coming out of the brass casing. Maybe you could set it up to where you had some, you could set it up, what would it be, continuously. Oh, there you go. Yeah, little rainbow things. You have to set up, so you want 100% of the time. Where would it be? You would have to make it to where it only lasted for the first little bit. Maybe opacity over life would do it. No, because that's doing it the whole time. Oh, wait, no, we want continuously. Well, again, I don't know enough about this. I'm sure if I played around with it, I could figure it out. But, you can see here, you would want it to be this far and then die off, which I'm sure there's a way to do it. You can do anything with this program. Visibility, this is all at default. But, I could see maybe wanting this near start fade for if you have stuff coming towards the camera. You don't want it to look unnatural. Full render, all this stuff. I mean, if you have a slower machine, you could turn down the particle count and then turn it back up to render. But particular is pretty fast. I mean, I'm on a fast machine, but I mean, as I'm just scrubbing through stuff, and any decent graphics card will probably give you the same performance. So I think that's it. So yeah, so make whatever it is you want to animate, and then bring that as a comp. Make your wall, your floor. I mean, I just put in a generic background just to have it, but make your two planes that you need to interact with. Go into particular and, just start at the top. So you got your emitter, do that. It's linked with a couple of expressions. Let's see here, U. So I linked Y for the rotation, and I linked X, Y, and Z for the emitter position. And go down to particle, set it to the brass, play once, play around with your size to what makes sense in your scene. Do your physics, set up your two planes, set up all that stuff. And now you have a rig for your shot that you can, like I said, if all of a sudden you switch to a Dylan minigun, and you definitely don't want to, you definitely wouldn't want to animate all that one by one. And then, if it's an AR-15, maybe it's 5 shots per second. Turn on motion blur switch for the layer. Turn on global motion blur. And now everything gets, much nicer. Places in the scene much better. That makes all the difference in the world from looking like something that was just pasted in the scene to something that's actually in the shot and moving and, could have been part of the original real thing. I think that's it. Hopefully, this gets you guys thinking, and I know it saved me. I was much happier with the results when I switched to this method. It saved time and it looked better. So win-win. I just had to, I tried earlier to experiment with, setting up particular to do the muzzle flares as well. I just found the file. If you look online on Red Giant's site, there's a Red Giant muzzle flashes thing. I forget exactly where it is, so sorry I'm not more helpful, but I know it's on their site where people post all kinds of stuff and share things. And so I found this. As you can see there, they even have a marker. So, I mean, and the show file has, the project file has all kinds of stuff. So it's got smoke. So that could be your muzzle flash smoke. It has, even that right off the bat is a nice looking, muzzle flare. You got some little sparks, kind of like the primer going off. You got bigger fireball, a narrower fireball. So the three together is pretty cool. It's there for like a frame. And let's see, I think I can just rotate this guy the way it's set up. Yes. So basically what you have is, say, now you have 3D volume because it's made in a 3D program. So now as you go from -90, you're there, say -45, you're at an angle, you still have that 3D volume. It's not turning flat like a piece of stock footage would. 0 is now pointing straight at the camera. 45 is pointing kind of over the shoulder of the camera. And now 90 is pointing right. If we keep wrapping around, what would it be? Test my math in my head here. Another 45 degrees would be 135. So now it's pointing away from the camera, I think. 180, pointing 100% away from the camera. And it has that nice volume. This combined with the other rig to eject the brass shells. You track this emitter to the muzzle, attach the other emitter to the ejector port, and you have all within particular creating the muzzle flares and the brass shell casings in a very dynamic way. You could set this up if you set this up to trigger. Okay, this is linked with an expression to trigger there. So you'd have to modify this to keep shooting over time. But, as long as you link them to the same rate of fire, you'd have a pretty cool animation with actually not a lot of work, but a much better result. So, hope that helps. Go online to Red Giant's site, find the Muzzle Flashes project. Pretty cool stuff.